Welcome back to the Adventure Athletes podcast. In this week's episode, I sit down with Chris Hill, who is an absolutely incredible athlete. He's massive in the world of Ironman. He's done multiple Ironman events. He's done all of the ones in the UK and Ireland in one season. He's done three, like a triple distance Ironman, and he's currently training for a Deca Ironman. So that's 10 Ironman events in 10 days. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me, mostly because I can't swim. So the idea of triathlon at an Ironman just absolutely petrifies me. So to see him doing that and to talk about how running is his weak point just shows that we've all got our own strengths and weaknesses. I'd never met Chris before. I didn't know too much about him outside of his challenges, but sitting down and listening to him on this podcast, it is clear that he's got a wealth of knowledge behind him. He's got a ton of life experience, and the things that he shares are things that really made me think about what I'm doing, ever since. It was something that I really needed at the time. I always tell people when I talk to them in person that this podcast is like therapy. Sometimes it's like therapy for me, like this episode is. Sometimes it's like therapy for the guest, and they need to share these things and put themselves out there. So just before we go into the podcast, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about my 6 and 6 challenge. So I'm going to leave a snippet here from a recent social media campaign that I'm doing with Sport in Mind. If you want to donate, I'll leave a link in the description below. But for now, listen to me talk about my challenge. Hi, my name's Will, and I'm going to be running 6 ultramarathons over 6 consecutive days, and I'm doing this to raise money and awareness for Sport in Mind. Now, this challenge is really going to push me to my limits. I'm going to be running over 230 miles with over 8,000 metres of elevation across the 6 days. I've never done anything like this before. Something that's really helped me with my mental health, not only through physical activity, but it's been the community that it's brought with me. So at the start of 2020, I was made homeless. I slept on a mixture of the streets and my fire service sofas for a period of about 6 months. Now, when I did finally find somewhere to live, I broke my ankle and I spent the next 6 months not able to put my foot on the floor. And after that, I had to relearn to walk, run and complete any sort of physical activity again. This was a massive hit to my confidence and my mental health, and unfortunately it led me to suicidal tendencies and ideation. So I really do believe in what Sport in Mind are doing. The fact that they embody both the things that I believe in, which is sport to improve your mental health, and building community and safe spaces for people to not just talk about their mental health but feel a part of something, know that they're not alone, and that honestly can be one of the biggest factors in improving someone's mental health. Now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get more support and awareness around my challenge. If you'd be able to support in any way possible, please reach out to me. I'd really love to hear from you. And finally, just before we get into the podcast, which I know you're all waiting for, a quick message from our sponsors over at Soulmate.
We're Soulmate. Whether you're new to running or an experienced runner, we've got you covered for both road and trail, from shoes to nutrition to running poles and everything in between. Use code ADVENTURE10, both in-store or online, for 10% off your order.
And now, enjoy the podcast. What was your call to adventure?
So for me, my call to doing this lifestyle was me kind of becoming a dad in a lot of ways. I kind of needed to prove to myself more than anything, but at the time, what the vehicle I kind of used for that was proving everybody else wrong, as opposed to proving myself right. But yeah, it was coming to dad. At the time, I didn't really feel like I was kind of achieving much in my life or doing much, and I felt like a lot of people felt that way about me, but it didn't really come out until finding out I was going to be a father. And then as soon as that happened, I kind of made a promise to myself and made a promise to my partner that I'll be anything and do anything that's needed. So kind of getting into endurance events, because I myself have a coaching business, and wanted to be that coach that kind of walk the walk and talk the talk, as opposed to just kind of told people what to do. It was really important to me that I led by example, and not only to my clients but to those closest to me, like my family, like my kids. I've now got 3, so it's continually doing that on a full-time basis, if you will. And as a result, and kind of finding myself and really kind of proving myself to myself, if you will, it's kind of really sparked this ambition to really make my life as fulfilling as I possibly can, and squeeze every kind of drop out of life, if you will. Whereas when I was kind of younger, I kind of didn't really have that confidence to do that, so for me, the call to adventure now is life, even though I still have the same reasons and ambitions of why I'm doing it, but I think that call has kind of transitioned, if you will, and kind of changed and flowed as I've got older, into originally doing it for my kids, for my family, and for my partner, but now it's more importantly for myself, and by all means they are the motivation in some respects, but also me learning that I am enough to myself and my own ambitions, and try to do as many adventures as I possibly can, so I can be this old man that inspires my kids, inspires my grandkids, and hopefully, touch wood, inspires my great grandkids, and I can leave something behind in a sense of this ability for them to believe in themselves, because I feel in a lot of respects, I was kind of 21 going on 22 when I had my first child, and I feel like I kind of wasted that first 22 years not believing in myself. So if I can give that confidence and that self-belief to my kids through kind of walking the walk and talking the talk, then to me that's everything, and to me, if I can use honest conversations like this and live in a sense of authentically, then I'd love to make a difference, and I'd love to inspire people that I meet, or those around me, or nowadays people through podcasts, through online social media. We live in a world where we've never been so connected and yet so disconnected, and I think when you see people kind of sharing their true selves and also finding themselves along the way, I think it's really powerful. I certainly have found it powerful myself as I've kind of gone through this journey. So yeah, I hope to continue doing it, and I hope to, like I said, do as many adventures as I possibly can in life, and really kind of get the most out of it.
Yeah,
as I possibly can,
No, that's amazing. I'm really drawn to this idea that you've brought up of your kids being the reason you do it, because I meet certain people like you where it's been the best thing ever. Kids is always going to be an amazing thing in your life, but for the rest of your life, you said, you want to inspire them. You've then taken on bigger and better challenges, and you've had that belief in yourself. But then I always see people on the other end of it where it's I've had kids and I've given everything up for them.
Yeah.
What do you think's been that reason for that change for you to make it that positive in a way? I'm not saying kids are negative, but
no, absolutely. I think for me it was when I was younger, I kind of really struggled with knowing who I was and who I was meant to be. I always felt kind of on the out, if you will. I didn't really feel kind of a part of anything, or it just felt different. I kind of got diagnosed being dyslexic when I was kind of in primary school, Year 6, I was the first kid there to get diagnosed with that. Year 7, it was ADHD, and was the first kid in my school to get diagnosed with that, and never really felt like I fitted in. So when I had kids, it was kind of like, right, okay. The reason why I had kids so early was I kind of wanted this family unit to love me, because I didn't feel very lovable, So having my kids, I wanted to show them and prove to them that they were absolutely perfect, regardless of their flaws, regardless of anything. And I also wanted to show them that I'm, in a lot of respects, perfect with my imperfections, and by all means I am a totally flawed human being, but I think there's beauty in that. I think there's also perfection in that, and if you can teach people to search for excellence instead of perfection, and lead by example through that, and for me, my kids inspire me every day. I learn so much from them, and I'm one of these parents that, because of the nature of my job and I kind of work from home, I'm kind of really blessed in a way that I get to spend so much time with them. But I'm also gutted when they have time off and then they go back to school, because I check in on them all the time. Partly because of my ADHD, not being able to refocus, and so on. But I've turned it into this amazing thing where I'll work for a bit and then I'll get bored, I'll go off, I'll check in on my 3 kids, I'll see what they're up to, I'll spend a bit of time with each one, and then I'll come back and refocus, and I'll crack back on with work. And that's kind of like this never-ending cycle where, in a lot of respects, they inspire me just as much as I hope I inspire them, so I think for a lot of parents, and obviously I can't speak on their behalf, but at the same time I'm going to try. I think as parents we forget who we are. I think we work so hard on committing ourselves to work, committing ourselves to what we think should be done. We actually forget who we are, and we forget that we're still growing, and this is still our first experience. I think so many of us put it to the back burner, and we're like, oh, we'll do that at that point, we'll do that. When in reality, I'm sure as you know, there is no perfect time to start anything. It's always going to come at you like a million times and so on. Like in the last few years, there has been a million things that have popped up, and I've had a ton of people say, oh, Chris, maybe you should postpone this event, maybe you should postpone these challenges that you set yourself and so on. And in a lot of respects, rightfully so, but what I've learned is you're not guaranteed tomorrow, and I've also learned that in a lot of respects, if not now, when? Because we put things off, and I could postpone this challenge that I'm doing in a few months until next year, and maybe, on the off chance I might have a better run up to it. But at the same time, I might also not do it, and then I might postpone it for another year and another year, So for me, it's kind of like drawing on that kind of authentic self that I try my very best to be. So then I can go and tell my truth to people like yourself, people that are listening, but also, and most importantly to me, is those around me, like my kids, like my partner, that, yeah, okay, you might see this success, but I'm also going to tell you about the leading up to it. Because if I'm here facing adversity, and then, like for example, my son, he's 12 years old, he just went away for his first weekend camp with the cadets that he's a part of. He was super, super nervous beforehand, and then he's come home today and he's never been prouder of himself. And it's that we forget that as adults we push our kids into things, and we go, oh, come on, let's go be brave, and let's do this, or you're fine, get up, brush yourself off, go again. But it's so much more powerful if you're the one doing it as well, and your child is seeing you do it firsthand, so then they can pick you up in those moments. And I've had my kids see it all, all the challenges, all the races and so on and so forth. It makes me nothing but happy when I see my family kind of there clapping and supporting. And for me, it's the whole reason why, in a lot of respects, I do it. There's obviously my selfish reasons, but there's a huge element that I get a lot of kind of gratification from seeing my family seeing me and supporting me, and hopefully then inspiring them. Because I remember when my eldest, Ruby, was 2, and we kind of went to kind of Noah's Ark zoo farm right over in Bristol, and right at the entrance there's this kind of play area for the kids, and she kind of went up this tower, kind of climbing through the little hole, walking along, climbing up, and so on and so forth. And she got to the top and then realised how tall she, like how high it was. And my partner said to me, and we had all our family there and so on, and my partner said, "Oh, you're going to have to go get her, because I can't climb up there." So there I was, climbing through these little tubes in this play area, climbing up the little stairs, and then there was like this little kind of netted kind of web that you kind of climbed across to then go down the other side where there was a slide. And I remember saying to my daughter, and my kind of everyone there was like, "What are you doing? You shouldn't be saying this." Like, but for me, I was like, "Oh, that's really scary, isn't it?" Like, because it was the height of a 2-story building, so it was scary, especially for a 2-year-old. And I just kind of looked at her and I was like, "Oh wow, that's really scary, isn't it?" And she was like, yeah. And I just said, the thing is, when there's something scary, it means we got to do it. And she looked at me and was like, "Oh, okay, because she's 2, innocent as everything." And I said, "But the cool thing about this," I said, "we get to do it together." I said, "So if you hold my hand, we can do this together," and so on. And we literally walked across that little kind of netted kind of area, across to the other wooden kind of tower, and then she went down a few levels and then went down a slide, and that was it. But it's been that kind of story, if you will, and that theme that I've tried to implement throughout their entire lives. So it's okay to be scared of things, but without vulnerability you can't be brave. A lot of us kind of make out that we're brave and we would be these people in certain situations, and then all of a sudden fight or flight kicks in and we freeze and we don't know really who we are. And something that's kind of really important to me is going down that road and deciding, well, who are you? What are you about? What are you, like, what do you stand for? Like, for me, I'm a huge fan, if you will, of characteristics. So I kind of try and surround myself with people that there'll be an element of their character that I really like, that I really admire. And for me, I just kind of, for example, if you were kind of a really trustworthy person, I would then want to have you there so I could learn and be more like you in regards to being more trustworthy.
Yeah.
And if you had another person and they were the kindest human being in the world, the most generous, cool, like, let me learn from you. I want that characteristic, you know, and you name it, like all the characteristics that are out there. There's certain ones that I want to learn from, and I kind of want to add more to myself. I think of it very much as almost like a computer game, where you're kind of trying to level up your character, and you've got all these kind of little characteristics that you're trying to earn points from, and you're trying to level up those characteristics. And for me, that's really important. So I kind of, by no means, think I'm perfect, and I don't think I'll ever be perfect, but I think as long as I'm here, I'm going to try my best to become the best that I can be. Like, and it's not even necessarily about to being better than anybody else, but it's certainly being better than I used to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly important when you can sit there, and I'm sure you'll agree, the more you go down this road, the more you learn who you are, and the more you're exposed. And for me, what I love about kind of like challenges that are up and coming, multi-day events, and similar to the one you're going to do, it's day one you might be fine. Day one might just, it's another event, you know, and it might be challenging to some degree depending on the terrain or the weather that has been presented. But day two might also be okay, and all the rest of it. But then day three you might be exposed, and all of a sudden you're kind of stood there naked, and now it's right now the challenge starts. And okay, officially you started 2 days ago, but you've now got 4 days where you're truly exposed, and this is where you find out who you are. Day 1 and 2 was only merely kind of like that process of just undressing, you know, and then when you are in that place where you are truly exposed, it's this beautiful process where now you get to find out who you are. You know, now you get to see how deep you're willing to go. And it doesn't necessarily mean that once you get there, that's it, that's the full stop. Because I believe there's layers to this. And sometimes you might have to, kind of like if you're kind of clearing through a forest, you might have to chop a few trees down, go back to base, you know, resupply, then go back out again. And that first little section is going to be okay because you've been there before, you know, the path has been paved and so on. But then if you want to go further down this road, then you've got to lay that kind of foundation and those bricks one by one, you know. And that for me is kind of like adding jobs to a CV. We hold the CV when it comes to work experience and our kind of financial jobs. But I kind of often tell clients when it comes to their self-development journey, effectively when you're stretching your comfort zone, you're adding to your CV of who you are. So then that way on race day you can stand there with all these work experiences on your CV, so you know that you're capable of doing this race. And I think that's really important when you're kind of going down that rabbit hole to find out, because some people might have it, you know, I certainly didn't when I was a kid, you know, I didn't believe in myself, and I was this person that had a million dreams, you know, being a typical person with ADHD, bounced around a lot, you know, had great ideas, never really knew how to put them into practice. And then started listening to everybody else because I didn't follow through on those ideas. A lot of people said, well, a lot of respect, mate, you're full of it, aren't you? You know, you kind of always come up with these things, but you never kind of follow through. And in a lot of respects, they were right. But also the way my brain works is I'm a very big believer in kind of planning ahead. So I might kind of sit here and talk about things and that kind of that bucket list or that race wish list, if you will, that I go, right, I'd love to do all these races, and there's millions of them, like, you know, millions of challenges, millions of races, all different types of sports, from like mountaineering to kind of endurance racing and stuff, because I just like adventure, you know. But then a lot of factors come into that, whether it comes into finances, whether it comes into kids and family life and so on. And the reality is, if I had an unlimited financial pot, then yeah, of course I'd crack on as soon as I can, like, you know. But life comes in the way, so I put these lists aside and I try and think, right, okay, for example, like I'm 40 in 3 years, so I kind of want to do something big for that. Kind of don't really know what yet, but I'm kind of trying to put a few ideas out so then I can work backwards over the next 3 years, so then I can make that dream a reality. Whereas to some people, I think because their brain doesn't work like that, they think, oh, he's just kind of talking a lot of nonsense, like, you know. And I think in that regards, that's when you kind of get your criticism. That's when you kind of get the everyday person kind of really tapping into you and saying like, oh, Chris, like, you know, you're never going to do that, because they just see the person in front of them. They can't see the person that you could be in 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, you know. And whereas like I used to believe that, whereas now I'm fully kind of aware of my capabilities, and I'm fully willing to take myself as far as I could possibly go to see just how far I'm really willing to take this.
No.
You know, because there's a million of people that are way more kind of badass, if you will, than I am, I believe. You know, you can just go on social media and find people that are absolutely punching their ticket every day, you know, kind of grinding, like putting themselves out there, pushing themselves, you know, doing all sorts of races, all sorts of incredible things, like, you know, and achieving things that are just mind-blowing. And I don't think I'm there yet, but at the same time I'm 37, you know, and I feel as young as ever, and I feel that, or I'd like to believe that I'm going to do this until I physically can't.
Yeah.
And then I'll find another thing, and I'll keep stretching it and keep going in other ways and other capacities, and then hopefully help others come along on the journey that they want to go down, and so on. So for me, it's kind of like, how can you learn all these things and then pass it on to the next generation or the person next to you, you know, because I think deep down we all have dreams and aspirations, and I think if you were truly honest with yourself, you'd probably say them out loud. But I think insecurities get the better of us, and I think we shy away from it, because if we say it out loud, we often get laughed at, and I think that's a massive shame. So if I can do things like this, like speak on a podcast with a bit of honesty and a bit of integrity, then maybe others will have the confidence to speak their truth and just start, you know. Because I remember when I first started this journey, I was absolutely blowing, just jumping in a swim pool and swimming one length and having a few minutes at the rest at the end, and building up to doing 20 lengths in an hour, whereas now I can swim just like an Ironman swim in about an hour and 10 minutes, you know. So starting is the most important thing, and I think if a lot of people actually spoke and shared their journey, the truth on Instagram, you know, as opposed to the kind of sexy version, the edited version, and it would inspire far more people.
Yeah.
Because I speak to so many people, and you'll know as a coach yourself, I try and have it, end up having the same conversation with my athletes all the time, and then I try and get those to reach out to each other, because quite often they're having the same sorts of feelings, and yet one person won't speak to the other person because, well, that person's way better than I am, so how are they experiencing the same thing as I am? You know, they're so much faster. When in reality, it doesn't matter how fast you are, you can still experience the same sorts of emotions, the same sorts of insecurities and stuff. And that comes down to your past experiences, who you are, how much you've actually kind of worked on yourself mentally and put that kind of preparation in, and it doesn't necessarily correspond to how good you are athletically. You know, we like to think it does sometimes, you know, the mental journey in regards to the physical journey, when in reality sometimes, you know, people have gone through a million things and haven't run a mile, you know. And it's remembering that resilience doesn't just come from endurance sports, it doesn't just come from the weight room, it comes from life, it comes from being a single parent, you know, it comes from overcoming adversity in your childhood, it comes from helping sick relatives, you know, and working a job and just doing those sorts of things. So it's we tend to compartmentalize a lot of stuff, when sometimes, and that's great for coping strategies, but I think it's also great when in certain situations you get to empty those boxes on the table and just say, this is all of you, this is everything you are, and you can take that resilience from your job and you can slide it into your first race. And if you are over here managing people, then maybe you can micromanage your schedule a little bit better, so we can look at your training and tap into that in a little more functional way or whatever. And I think once you start kind of going down that journey and teaching people those sorts of things, they start connecting the dots, and that's when they can really make a difference with themselves. And you'll know that's where kind of I really come alive. And I imagine yourself, when you see these people kind of, you see the light bulbs start to switch on, you start seeing them start actually voicing their actual real dream, you know. It kind of started off with a little one, you know, and although at the time that was big for them, but deep down they had this massive goal that they really wanted to do, and they're just too afraid for whatever reason just to voice it. And then
it almost seems like unachievable to them in their eyes.
Yeah, massively.
And then having like someone like you believe in them, and they can see that through the process of what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing that like flips
switches it. Yeah, definitely. You know, and I like to think if I can use my strength from my experiences to kind of almost be like that scaffolding around you whilst you build yourself, that's cool. Lean on me, you know, that's fine. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
That's the difference that I want to make. And I think a lot of us kind of want to make that difference, you know. And it's just, for me, I'm a very visual person, so I kind of went to New York for the first time at the end of last year, or the beginning of this year even. Partner kind of treated me for that for my birthday, and it was a kind of very visual thing in regards to that scaffolding, because these are some of the biggest skyscrapers in the world, and yet they almost all have scaffolding around the bottom of them. And it just reminds me, it doesn't matter how big you think you are and so on, it's that support system around you that holds you there, you know. So for example, yourself, you have a podcast, I'm sure you listen to other podcasts, and you have goals or aspirations to make your podcast as big as such and such a person's podcast, to have as big a reach as that person or whatever. And I think the more you kind of build that empire around you and around others, and effectively you kind of focus on the foundations, focus on the community you're building, as opposed to the podcast itself, and then just sit back and watch the community look after your podcast, you know. And it's like, you reaching out to me says a lot, you know, in regards to what you're willing to do, but also in regards to my journey, because I feel like that's how I started out, you know, just literally reaching out to people. And I think it's also important to allow others to reach out to you, but then also for you to come along and help people and have those help you. And I think so many people they think the main focus of self-development is self, when I think also, yes, that in part is true, but I also think you can get there and go further, if you will, through community. The more you build up that community, the more that community looks after you, and that certainly saved my life, if you will, and saved my kind of business when it came to the pandemic a few years ago, because I used to work in a commercial gym, and then all of a sudden that kind of shut down on a Friday, and I lost my job, you know. And if it wasn't for the community that I worked with and kind of invested in and gave countless freebies to, you know, like before I charged a single penny, I was working full time for free, you know, in the gym, giving out free PT sessions and free one-to-ones and free massages, working in elite sport for 3 years for free, trying to invest in my knowledge and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, the moment I needed that community, that I had people reach out to me left, right and centre going, how can we look after you? And that was just this brilliant reflection on everything that I'd done for them. The people that I kind of helped achieve their goals and their dreams and their aspirations. And right at the time, that was a real learning experience, because I was so used to helping everybody else. It was like, oh no, it's fine, you don't need to help me. And kind of you build yourself up to be this kind of martyr almost, that it feels weird accepting help. It feels weird that because you're so used to doing it one way. And I think the real community starts when you start accepting it both ways. If you want to make a difference, allow those around you to also feel like they're making a difference. Because you can't be the person that is always giving without learning to receive. And I think the moment I learned to receive and learned to accept help from the community I built was the moment I kind of really truly changed my life. And it's taken me to places that I never once really ever thought I'd be. I generally thought I'd still have to work in a commercial gym. I never thought that I would be able to, I went from working kind of 50 to 70 hours a week to being able to take my kids to school, pick my kids up from school, have tea with them. These things are so important to me, and I'm still able to provide for my family whilst working less. And before the pandemic, I would never have visioned a way, certainly until my youngest is in high school, that would happen. And it's been life-changing, just kind of accepting that help, but also coming off the back of putting yourself out there in the first place, not being afraid to initially kind of be judged, because that's the biggest thing that stops us. We kind of almost put our foot at the bottom of the door and then wonder why when we open it, it's not opening, And I've done that with a million things. I still do it with a million things, but it's just learning that, right, okay, today, if I just let one thing through, then eventually I'll get there. I often think about kind of social media. So similar to yourself, I'm slowly developing a YouTube channel. It's a kind of a passion for me, in the sense that I love being creative and kind of want to show people the honest truth behind all of the event success, if you will. And by no means am I the fastest, I do hard things, yeah, of course. But I'm just a guy. I'm literally a dad. I'm 37. I'm trying my best. I'm not beating many people, there are a million people faster than me, and I don't try to proclaim I am the fastest athlete out there. But I just want to kind of develop myself, and by doing so, if I can share my journey through my YouTube channel, I think every video I kind of throw out there, I like the analogy of throwing a little stone in the ocean. Hopefully someone will find it, sometimes there's more fish there than other times, as I'm sure you can relate. But I think eventually, if I keep throwing those little pebbles, then all of a sudden there's a giant mound of stones underneath where I keep throwing them. And then eventually that community of fish will start using those stones as a little coral reef, and it'll build this infrastructure, this beautiful kind of coral that can be this community, that can be this place where others feel safe, other people flourish, other people grow themselves, and then in turn inspire them and do, so they can do things, similar things, and so experiences like this I'm incredibly grateful for, and I can't thank you enough for inviting me, because I just see it just like the things I'm trying to do myself. This is another opportunity, this is another stone that's being kind of thrown out there, that one, you can have a beautiful conversation to, you can learn as much as you possibly can from each other, but also in the sense that you're over here kind of throwing your stones, I can be over here throwing our stones, and then all of a sudden your community can find my community can find your community. And I think if more people realise that this is how the best way to move forward with your goals and your dreams and your ambitions. You go, like, I just believe that you go so much further when you go with others, you know, and you're willing to kind of push yourself, use yourself as the example, but then come back and, like, once you've paved a little bit of that pathway, don't be afraid to go back and collect others and help them along their kind of journey. And some will want to come so far, you know, and stop, set up camp, you know, and that's as far as they want to go, and that's okay, that's cool. Some people will want to go further than you will, you know, and then it's about being that kind of foundation, that kind of scaffolding around them, so when they are walking down that path and leading the way, that they feel safe, they feel supported and guided, and not that like they're on their own. But then they might be then in turn the people that inspire you, you know, because I've got an incredible group of athletes right now that are all shapes, all sizes, all in different stages of their life, all having different experiences, from kids to medical issues to scary kind of medical situations, to life transformations, from losing weight to actually finding themselves, and then to going on to doing these incredible things that just are all inspiring, you know, and you just go, well, bloody hell, like, you know, like, it's amazing, you know. You don't have to go far to look and find inspiration, you know. I know we got social media, and I know in some respects it's easier to find the inspiration when you're sat online and they're from a different country and so on and so forth. Or I think we tend to throw so much weight to a following number, you know. Well, they've got 1 million followers, so they must be good, you know. And okay, some degree, yeah, okay, I'm sure they've worked really hard for that following, but also a person down the road with a private account can also be just as inspiring, you know. And I think sometimes we forget that, you know. I think when we're on social media we focus so much on the number when it's remembering that there's a person behind that number, you know, and we're all people at the end of the day. And I think it's just as inspiring when you're learning from, like, some of my clients are in their 60s, you know. One of my clients, he's in his 70s and he's just ridden the car 10, you know. He's got 2 artificial knees, and I think that's incredible, you know. He had his knee operations and as a result learned to swim, you know, and does swimming every week and swimming events and races and so on, and is just as much as inspiring as some of the younger clientele that I have that are doing incredible things, doing their first 5k or are losing weight so they can have kids, you know. And I think the more you stop, the more you listen, the more you open yourself up to listening. You know, my partner certainly is teaching me that slowly. Because naturally, as someone with ADHD, I tend to listen to respond instead of listening to hear, because you might say something and I go, right, I've got an idea, and then I'll cut you up, and I don't mean to do that by any means. So if for the listeners out there, if you have someone who has any sort of neurodivergencies, just be patient with them, you know. They don't always tend to know that they're interrupting or even mean to interrupt, but naturally you've said something, it's triggered a thought, and I'll need to say what I gotta say, you know, just so by the time you finish I won't have lost it. But my partner's certainly working hard with me, trying to teach me to listen to hear instead of listening to respond. And I think the more we listen to hear, the more we can actually learn so much from those around us, you know. And I try my best, and I sit there and I listen to my kids, and like my youngest is 9 years old and she teaches me things all the time, you know, because they're watching things like, you know, we grew up without YouTube, and they're watching things on YouTube, and they're learning quicker than we were, you know, and quicker than we are in some respects. And I think if you're open to learning from even the kind of the unusual sources, you know, I think so many parents think because, like, certainly, I don't know whether you'll resonate with this or not, but the older generations, you know, it was certainly said to myself that, well, they're older than me, so they know more than I do. Whereas I'm kind of the same age gap between me and my son is the same age gap as me and my dad. And I remember being my son's age thinking, right, my dad's in his 30s, he's an adult, he knows, everybody knows everything, you know. Yeah. And then you get to your 30s and you realise everybody's all full of it, you know. Nobody knows what they're doing. Everyone is blagging it by the seat of their pants. And somehow we are surviving, you know. And I think that's an incredible, important thing to say, because there's a bunch of people out there that are struggling with their mental health. And I think if more of us turned around and said, actually, I'm really bloody struggling, and life is incredibly hard right now, and I wish that more people were just honest about it, instead of like uploading this picture perfect photo or this brilliant angle of them training or running, and you see their Strava and they've gone out and run 50 miles, and in their video that they upload they look bloody perfect, and you're like, I don't look like that. You know, I was hanging out my ass, like, you know, doing that and so on. And then you look at their pace and you go, oh, well, that's better than mine as well, and so on. And you just end up hammering yourself for no reason, when if people shared the good and the bad, you know, and the absolute brutal honest, then in a lot of respects it'd make us all feel pretty good about ourselves, you know. It would. And don't get me wrong, there are some rock stars out there, you know, that are just incredible athletes, you know, incredible human beings that go further than any of us go. But I think that's important for society. And I also think that people who, like, I often attribute to, like, society as this kind of staff, if you will, the spear, right? There's some people that need to be the tip of the spear, but there's also people that need to be elements of the kind of wooden pole, if you will. Because just like if we were to go back to our caveman days, if you will, I imagine people like myself were probably the people who left the cave first, because we got bored, you know, and we left the cave, and all of a sudden we were chasing random animals and trying to catch them, and then probably eating berries that we probably shouldn't have been eating, and learning the hard way, you know. But it's those people with ADHD, for example, that are probably going to be doing that stuff just because they're bored in the cave. But then there's also the people who stayed in the cave that offered infrastructure and did different elements within the community. And I think understanding that all of us have a place in this community, all of us are equally as important. And I think it's really important to kind of mention those things, that you can still do incredible things. It just means that your journey might look slightly different than others. And I think that's important to say, because a lot of endurance events, there's a million ways to train for them. Yes, there's the gold standard. And yes, there's, right, okay, here's a template of this is how it should roughly look. But I can honestly turn around and tell you that every year that I've trained for something that I've done, there's been a million things that have gotten away. And there's been a million training sessions that I haven't been able to do. And yet I've still got across that finish line. And that's because that self-confidence, that self-belief is far more important than any training session. You know, yes, in a lot of respects, that's where you build that self-confidence and self-belief. So it is important in that respect. And like I said earlier, it's important to develop that CV so you can have something to lean on when you're feeling vulnerable. Because you can literally just pull that CV up and go, look at what you've done so far. This is proof that you are who you say you are, and proof that you're qualified for this job. And I think a lot of people, especially unknowing to the people just starting out, a lot of the high achievers in everything are often the most kind of the people who are often the hardest on themselves. You know, they're the people who struggle with their own mental health. They're the ones that struggle with anxiety, and they're the ones consistently trying to prove themselves worthy of the titles that they give themselves. You know, because quite often they don't feel worthy, and they don't feel that they have any right to have the titles that other people give them. So they have to then prove it again by doing another race or another event, you know. And I certainly was using that kind of vehicle for a long time, where I was using kind of anger and aggression to get the job done, and proving my self-worth to others, proving other people wrong. I would quite often say in my mind and say to those around me, it'd be like, that's fine, cool, grab a seat, you know, grab a seat on the stand with everybody else and watch me go do it, you know. And that's, in a lot of respects, my ego talking, and it's a self-defense kind of mechanism. And at the time I needed it, and even sometimes now I still allow that to happen, in a sense, because it's me in that moment forgetting who I am. It's forgetting who I want to be, the person that I want to be. And right there and then it's kind of reaffirming that person who you are. It's like, I imagine you probably have a session or a certain route that you do, that you might be coming up to a race and you go, right, I'm going to run that route, because that route confirms where I am. On that hill, I know exactly, depending on how well that day goes, I know whether I'm pretty good and pretty strong going into this race, or I know my pace might be slightly off, or I'm undertrained. And it's having those sessions or having those moments where, yeah, okay, puff your chest out, you know, like reaffirm who you are, reseal, like kind of brush up your CV, if you will, and kind of prove to yourself more than anybody. But then go out there on race day and don't look to prove anybody wrong, look to prove yourself right, because I think that's way more powerful, and I think that's also way more inspiring than if you're just using soul aggression and the desire to prove everyone wrong. And I think, yes, it's a fuel force, but I also think it's a short-lived fuel force, you know. Whereas if you really want to see what you're made of throughout your entire lifetime, then I think you have to find something a little bit more sustainable, you know, because otherwise the peaks are very high, you know, but then the troughs are very low, and you kind of end up doing this kind of yo-yo with your mental health that I don't think is the best thing for you. It's certainly one of the best things for me, and kind of like that post-race blues, it just hammers you, you know, because for me, I feel most regulated in regards to my ADHD when I'm in the middle of the season, in the middle of my events. And for me, my up and coming race, I know I will feel my most authentic self when I'm in the actual races, you know, in the event itself, because for me, it brings me to the present moment. It's like yourself, you know, if you're out on a trail running, you're very aware of how you feel. you know if your legs are hurting, you know if you've got blisters, you know if you feel good, you know if the weather is hammering you, you know all of this stuff, and you have a heightened sense of awareness. But also with the kind of the mental work that I've done, I'm also very aware of those around me. I'm very aware of the support network that I have. If I'm out here running in the rain and my family are out there running in the rain, or my friends, or people I coach have come to support me or whatever, then they're stood there getting soaking wet in the freezing cold just to watch me. I'm the only reason why they're there. And that's pretty incredible as well, you know, because they wouldn't do it if they didn't care about me, if they didn't love me. And for so long, literally I've been with my partner, this will be year 17, and it took 16 years for me to accept her love, you know, as crazy as that sounds. But there was a series of life events at the end of last year that kind of brought me to this conclusion that I finally accepted it. Whereas because of childhood trauma, I firmly believe that at some point she's going to leave me, because at some point she's going to realise that I'm an absolute nightmare, you know, and at some point she's going to be like, oh, I can't do this, you know. And because for so long throughout my childhood, it was just kind of like being, or certainly feeling like the kind of the black sheep of the family, this kind of underdog, this person that was kind of effectively destroying people around me, because I wasn't the easiest person to be around. I wasn't, didn't know how to micromanage my ADHD, didn't know how to micromanage my temper or anything like that. So in a lot of respects, I was like this little volcano that would boil inside and then erupt and then kind of cry by myself, you know, because I didn't know how to. I felt like I only had two emotions, you know. I felt like, in a lot of respects, I kind of see it in a lot of men, you know. You've either got this masculine phase where you're just alright, you know, you're the laugh, you're throwing out banter and so on and so forth, but then there's this kind of deep resonant pain or kind of anger or resentment because of the way life is treating you, and you then either kind of blow your lid, or you don't really know how to kind of micromanage those emotions. And certainly on my journey through going down this kind of pathway, and obviously learning through kind of reading materials, other podcasts, other athletes, the events I've done, it's kind of helped me really learn more and more about myself. And I can listen to some audiobooks at some points, or some podcasts, and be like, I learned actually this during this race. You know, I learned that about me during those moments, and it almost kind of concretes that information in, because I tend to learn through doing as opposed to being told or watching something or listening to something. But if I get that information and then I apply it in a physical manner, it tends to stick a little bit better, and then I kind of tend to go full circle again and put it into then the next practice, the next event, the next thing that I do, and then I try and teach my athletes or my family around me, you know. But when I'm certainly in these events, that heightened sense of gratitude, that heightened sense of present moment, that learning through physically doing it, that self-discovery, the sense of adventure, for me that encompasses the life that I want and certainly would love to live. And for me that is what life is all about, you know. It's true self-discovery. It's stripping off those layers and saying, right, who am I to the world? And then I think so many times we're often told when we're younger, and even now, there's so many adults now that are walking around and they're looking to find themselves, when I think we're looking in the wrong direction, you know. We're looking outside. We kind of got to go do this to kind of find ourselves, or go down this path to find ourselves, and so on. When in a lot of respects, it's like I said to someone the other day, it's taking the layers off ourselves. So just like when we're kids and we lay on the floor and all our friends pile on top of us, imagine all your friends putting layers of themselves on top of you and the people around you, sometimes your parents, sometimes your brothers or sisters or your aunties, uncles, your family, your closest friends, your best friends, and they have the greatest intentions for you, but they instill their beliefs on you, and you're laying underneath all these layers of other people's beliefs. And I think when you go down this journey, you end up taking these layers off, and you, like I said, you stand there eventually naked going, right, who am I? And then you take the next step. And the more you're willing to go down, the more you're in a continual cycle of taking off those layers. Because naturally, the stronger your CV, the stronger the layers you are to yourself. Kind of like when I did my first Ironman, on the build up to that, I said, the moment I cross that finish line is the moment I'll be able to do anything. I'll truly believe that I'll be able to do anything, and kind of like the Ironman mantra, anything is possible. I sold that to myself so hard, right? Because that was the first thing I did. I hadn't run a marathon at that point. I hadn't done a bike ride race. I hadn't done a swim race. It was my first triathlon. I was completely naive and was just like, that is the thing that I'm going to do. That's the thing that is going to inspire others. That's going to be the thing that sets me out from other people in the gym, because no one had done that sort of thing. I didn't know anybody that was in that world at the time, and it was certainly the biggest and hardest thing I'd ever done at that point. I'd ran Cardiff Half twice. I did a swim race. I say race, it was just a Marie Curie 5k swim in a pool, and I went in a pair of surf shorts and was like super naive, and kind of went in. It took me like 2.5 hours of literally swimming one length, having a breather, swimming another, totally naive. I had a bottle of Lucozade and a bottle of water, and I didn't know anything about anything, there was no electrolytes, there was no sport nutrition. It was like, I just picked that up from Asda, and off I went, and I died. I literally died. So building up to that Ironman race, I got into the habit of listening to motivational videos on YouTube. I stuck a few on my little iPod Nano at the time, and I was doing spin classes, so I had a little playlist for that. I was doing kind of circuit classes and other kind of similar things like kettlebell classes, so I had a little playlist for that. And then I had this motivational playlist that literally had 6 motivational videos that would play on a loop. So every time I walked to work, every time I was training, I was kind of almost like brainwashing myself with this stuff. And for me, I said, and I say it to other people, you have to become the greatest salesman to yourself, because you can sell it to other people, like, and quite often people that don't know you, it's easier to sell yourself to them, because your friend that has heard you for the last 6 years say that you want to do this Cardiff Half, and you're like, yeah, okay, mate, heard this for 6 years now, mate, you ain't doing it, and they got the greatest intention and they love you to bits, but now they've got this belief on you, and now they're adding that layer to you, and sometimes that layer weighs a ton, and sometimes you can't take it off, or you certainly feel like you can't take it off, when in reality it's not the truth. You can make that feel like a feather and take it off right now if you wanted to. But sometimes it's really hard, and especially when you're at the start of your journey. And a brilliant thing that I heard in regards to this is the crab effect. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
The camera stopped recording.
That's okay.
I've run out of space. I don't know when that stopped recording. The audio's still going, so that's
okay.
Something. The video just might cut out. Yeah, carry on. I'll just do this in the background. Yeah. So I have heard about the crab.
Yeah, and I as soon as I heard that, I thought that is so true. So for those who aren't listening, or those who are listening, should I say? Hope you're listening anyway. For those who are listening, the crab effect is where crab fishermen often place crabs in buckets without the lids on, And the reason why they do so is because crabs feel most safest when they're all piled on top of each other. Now, the more crabs you have in the bucket, the more obviously the crabs rise in the bucket. Now, there was a guy once watching a crab fisherman and asked the story, why don't you put a lid on the bucket? You know, they're going to get out. And he said, no, it's fine. Like, you know, watch. And as he placed more crabs in the bucket, and there was this one crab that kind of went to climb out. And what happened was, as he got closer and closer to climbing out and pulling himself up, the other crabs in the bucket pulled him back down. And it's quite often such a great analogy for life, in a sense that the moment you try and push yourself outside your social circle, the moment you try and sign up for a race and you quit going to the pub and hanging out with your mates on the weekend and start changing going for the pub to going for a run or doing a bike or swim or whatever your thing is, the more people will then try and pull you back in, because whether we realise it or not, all of our friends, all of our social circles are based on, in the nicest way, what do we offer our friends? You know, like, I like this person because they do this and that. I love that. They're the funniest person in the world. So when I'm feeling sad, I go around this person's house and he makes me feel better. You know, and it's little things like that, and quite often when you're looking to better yourself and looking to kind of grow and not necessarily be better than anybody else, and this is where the kind of common misconception is, you're just trying to be your best self. You're just trying to go down this pathway because for whatever reason you think it's cool. And quite often those around you, and it's quite often your closest friends, your family, they struggle with that concept because now all of a sudden you're not offering what they need. And just like the crab effect, they want to pull you back in. And that can be really tough. That can be quite negative sometimes, and that can be quite disheartening because all of a sudden your best friend doesn't feel like he's supporting you, or your best friend doesn't feel like you're kind of getting the support that you need from that. And sometimes that can be your parents, sometimes that can be your family, in the sense of they're just concerned that they don't want you hurting yourself, you know, or they've never done a run before, they don't train or they don't exercise, and there you are, you've just signed up for like in my case an Ironman, and they're like, mate, I think you've bitten off more than you can chew here, like, you know, you've done a half marathon, Chris, like, you know, calm down. You're gonna hurt yourself, like, you know.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard for them to comprehend because they've never done it before. They don't know it's possible. And in some respects, that's when you kind of get really annoyed, really frustrated, and you go, right, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong. And it can be, in a lot of respects, quite hard on the relationship. And sometimes you can fall out with that person, and it sometimes might not happen on the first race, you know, because they go, okay, cool, you've done your race, now get back in the box, you know, and you'll come back to the pub now, yeah, you know. And some people do, you know, they tick the box, and that's great for them, you know. For me, I kind of had this awakening process, and all of a sudden now my eyes are awoken, you know. Now they're wide awake, like, you know, and now I know what's possible. And for me, I said this to one of my friends before, and I said, self-development's dangerous. And he said, what do you mean? I said, because once you open your eyes, you can't close them.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true. Because once you start realizing that actually you're capable of quite a lot, and the more you go down a rabbit hole, the more you actually understand that, like, okay, certain things, like today, like if I were to go out and do an Ironman now, it wouldn't be the prettiest, you know. I'm not race ready. It wouldn't be the fastest. But I know I could do it. It would be potentially painful at certain points, you know. but there's not a shadow of a doubt that I know I could do it. And I'm sure that you feel the same way about kind of running and the training that you're doing, you know, and the things that you've achieved in the past. But it's knowing those things. And when it's your first time, you don't know. It's kind of like I said to a few people last year. So last year I did my first ever continuous triple Ironman. So it was all the swim in one go. It was all the bike ride in one go, followed by all the run. And then literally the least amount of sleep you can possibly have. Now to me, although I'd done a ton of things from my first Ironman to last year, and it been like, 8 years of doing things, you know, up until that point, last year being my 9th year, all of a sudden it felt like the first time again. It felt like there was a new door that I was walking through. It felt like all of a sudden I hadn't really kind of done anything on this scale, or certainly in the scale on my mind before. So it felt like the next doorway. And there was a bit of nervousness, there was a bit of apprehension, there was a bit of excitement, but then there was also, it felt like it was putting kind of 16 years of coaching into practice. It felt like I was putting into this kind of 8-year, going on 9-year kind of journey into practice, all of these little events, all these races that I'd done, all these moments that I'd learned how not to do things, you know, because let's be honest, you never remember how everything went to plan, you know, and I'm pretty sure there might be one race in your memory that it actually went pretty good, you know, generally. And certainly in my experience, there has been at least one thing.
I still don't think I've had that.
Yeah, in every single race, like, you know, every single race that I've had, that I've done, that there has been something that has gone wrong, you know. And but it's taught me so much, you know. And in some respects, like, I've had races where something's gone wrong in the swim, and then it's kind of frustrated me, and I've pushed even harder, and then PB'd on the bike. And then gone, oh shit, I've gone a bit too hard on the bike. And then all of a sudden, like, suffered on the run because of it. And there's been moments where, like, for me, ultramarathon running teaches me more about myself than any other sport. Purely because, right, I bloody hate running. Now, it's funny because anytime I want to dive a little deeper in myself, anytime I want to learn more about myself, anytime I feel like, right, you haven't pushed yourself in a while, it's always a running challenge. Because I will ride my bike all day long.
Yeah.
And I'm like, la da da, there we go, you know, just riding my bike. And I get the same kind of joy and pleasure from swimming. Like, swimming is my happy place, you know. Being in the sea is where I truly, if I've had a bad day, a bad week, I go to the beach, you know. And that's where I feel most connected, most spiritually connected, most myself. It's the same on mountains, you know. If you've ever had that experience by going up mountains, those two places for me show me how small and insignificant I am, and yet how amazing I am at the same time, because it brings you to your moment, you know. You're not on your phone, you're not scrolling social media, you're not doing any of this sort of stuff. You are truly present in that moment, and you're just aware of everything, you know. And I think for me, certainly running, it has exposed me the most, because it kind of strips away everything the quickest, you know. Like, I cycled a couple of years back the length of Britain in 8 days. Averaged, I think the smallest day was 98 miles, the biggest day I think was 126. And it was just one day after the other. And literally, and don't get me wrong, it was like, it was tough, and some of the climbs were like massive. You know, we went up a few of the big 100. So if you Google top 100 kind of climbs in Britain for cycling, I think we went up maybe 6 of them, right? And they're monsters, right? But it was awesome, right? And those moments is exactly what I was there for. And if I were to ever do it again, I would do it, but I would take longer to do it, because it's such a beautiful way of exploring this incredible country of ours. And it's kind of similar like to trail marathons, trail ultras, you know, Ironman races. You know, I've always said, wouldn't it be an incredible way to explore the world by just doing races around the world? You know, because while you're racing, you're not in a car, you're not traveling and just focusing on driving, you're there. You know, you're in the moment, and you're taking all of the beautiful scenery in, you're taking all of those experiences in, and now you've got this incredible story of going, oh, I'm going to such and such a country, and you go, oh, I've been there. I was doing this race at the time, and then you've got this amazing story that is embedded into your mind because you were halfway up a hill and it sucked, and there was a crosswind, and it was hailstone, and you were soaking, you were freezing, you were this, you were that, all these incredible experiences. Or maybe you witnessed this incredible sunrise on that peak, and the clouds looked like, I remember one time I was running at Penavan, and the clouds literally looked like waves in an ocean. And I was just above the clouds, and the sun just came up, and it was a clear sky above those clouds on the peak of the mountain. And it was incredible. And then the rest of the day, it was like super cloudy and overcast and raining and miserable. And I thanked myself so much for getting up early to go and witness that, whereas everybody else stayed in bed, and everybody else missed that moment in their lives. And for me, I want as many moments as I possibly can. For me, I think it's so important to kind of find those layers of yourself, find those moments in your life, and capture them. Like, so, and then obviously this is going to look different for everyone. You know, not everybody has to do an Ironman to have these moments. You know, some people are quite content with running park runs, you know, and like, I often kind of like take my son to football on Saturdays, so I see all these park runs going on. And because I always used to work Saturdays, I've never done a park run. But the mass participation in these events now, it's incredible, because I am a lover of this lifestyle, right? I'm the type of person, and I don't know about yourself, but on a sunny day when you see more people exercising, it just makes me smile. It makes me happy seeing people just out there living their life, trying to push themselves, trying to be better than they were yesterday. And I don't know how far they're going. They could like literally just be starting their journey and just running a mile today, and they're walking, and it's the hardest mile that they've ever done, you know. Or they could be running 100. You know, or they could be working up towards this incredible adventure that they've got planned later in the year or whatever. But it always makes me smile that you're just there, and you're just like, yeah, man, you know, these people are out there living their best life, or certainly trying to. And it's a kind of a nice, friendly reminder that you should be out there doing the same, you know. And I think in those moments, seeing people push themselves regardless of whatever they're doing or whatever they're achieving, you know, it's like, I've got this little joke with my family that the oldest Ironman is 85 years old, right? So at 86 I'll do it. You know, and by all means, if I'm at that capability that I can, then I will absolutely give it my best shot, you know. And if I miss the mark, then that's cool, because hopefully I'll have my kids and my grandkids standing there at the start line, the finish line, and around the course, and hopefully I'll make a lasting impression that even when I'm gone, and I'm dead and buried, that they're in turn inspiring their kids and their grandkids and their great grandkids. So this beautiful cycle kind of happens, because I certainly, like my parents, my mum went back to uni when I was a kid, and she kind of hid that away from us. She did all her homework and all her studies in her bedroom away from us. So then when I went back to university to study all the things that I do now, I made a conscious effort of sitting at the dining table. One, because we lived in a tiny flat at the time, so I didn't really have a choice, but I could have hid away in my bedroom, but I chose to do it at the dining table. So then when my daughter at the time had homework, she sat right next to me, and I did my homework and she did hers. And she's now 15 doing her GCSEs, and she's witnessed me go back to education, you know, and it took me a long time to go back. Initially, I thought it was going to be 2 years in college and 3 years doing my degree. Unfortunately, because I didn't do well in like high school, because I didn't believe in myself, I had to go back and resit my GCSEs to get into uni, despite getting all the grades in my kind of BTEC national diploma at the time to get into uni. They didn't even look at me, you know, and they kind of like rejected me. I didn't even get an interview. I didn't get any of it because I didn't have the GCSEs. Now, I had 18 out of 18 distinctions in college, you know, going back, and it was my daughter being there inspired me to get that, because I hadn't, before that point, I hadn't had one distinction, let alone 18 out of 18, you know. So by no means did it come naturally. I left school with 3 GCSEs, you know, and having my daughter, I made a promise to my partner that I would make this happen, and it was that goal and that drive that really started this whole journey in the process of me kind of believing in myself, and it forced me to kind of get it done. So when I didn't get into uni, I kind of cried my eyes out in my daughter's bedroom, sat on a changing mat to my partner, like, you know, and then she kind of helped me come up with the idea of going back, and it's not over, you know, go back, resit them. You know, if this is the road you want to go down, go back, resit it. And then I did that, and I passed everything, and then I got into uni, but that was the year that all the university fees went up, you know, so I couldn't get funding, you know, and then I ended up like having a random dream one night, woke up at 1:30, and I was like, well, what about part-time studies? And then turned out that I could pay for each module if I studied part-time, and at the time it was £9,000 a year, so £27,000 for the 3 years, and I ended up doing my degree over 6 years, and it cost me 7, which is something that they don't talk about, right? So if you want to go and do a degree and you can afford to fund it, you know, part-time is it's a tough option in regards to, like, for me, I got to my 4th year, and that's probably the make or break year, because I was struggling. I was like, had 2 more kids at that point. I was working full time. Like, obviously life gets in the way and everything. So it was harder to finish, you know, than potentially a 3-year degree. But if that's the only option that you have, then by all means visit it. And it's the only option I had. So that 5-year journey that was meant to happen took 9 years, you know, for me to eventually get it done. And obviously with that, you're kind of proving people wrong, you're proving some people right, you try to prove yourself right, you know, to yourself and those around you, and so on. And it feels like you got a whole stand of people kind of against you at the time, you know, and rightly or wrongly, but it's like I said earlier, it's based on their beliefs, you know, but at the time it certainly feels personal to you, doesn't it, you know? And a combination of all these little things have just made me who I am today, and certainly makes me want to be the dad that I am today, because I want to pass these lessons on, and I certainly hope I have, passed it on to my kids, and hopefully will continue passing it on for as long as I can live, through one adventure or one sort of thing. I've known people who, when I was starting my journey, a guy I know was at the age of 44 decided to go back to uni and become a physio, and now he's living his dream. And I think those sorts of things are incredibly inspiring. And don't get me wrong, it's certainly tougher when you got a house and a mortgage, and yourself, you're doing this podcast within your own spare time, and it's incredibly hard when you're juggling a career move, getting your first house and having a mortgage, having all these pressures on top of you, but it's kind of similar to how diamonds are made. Without that pressure, you then don't get that diamond at the end, and if you want to be the best you can be, or you want to kind of chase excellence, because I think that is important, to chase excellence and not perfection, and I think more people need to talk about that. It takes pressure, but it's also, it doesn't need to be this light switch that we turn on and off. It can be this dial, so just like a dimmer switch on a main light, you can turn it up if you need to, but you can also turn it down when you need to. And I think that's important, that remembering consistency doesn't look like 7 days a week. It can look like 6 sometimes, it can look like 7 sometimes, but it can also look like 4, and it's focusing on the long-term development, and certainly as a coach, I try my best to every so often get my athletes to zoom out and kind of remember where they've come from, and remember what their journey started like, and at one point they wished that they were at this level, and they're currently at that level, and they're focusing so much on where they want to be, they forget where they are.
Yeah.
And they also forget where they've come from, and I think that's so important, that in a lot of respects that we all do this, and I think it's nice to have these friendly reminders. But I'm a big believer in certainly trying to teach myself lately in the last 6 months, it's dials, not switches, and I think that's super important. Whereas before, certainly with my ADHD, I was kind of all or nothing, and I think I'm kind of transitioning into that dial mentality, so then I can turn certain things up when I need to, and turn things down when I need to, because naturally, just like when you're kind of cooking your roast dinner, there's multiple things on the hob, and if you turned it all up, you're more likely going to burn some stuff, as we all know, and by all means, there's certain times where it needs to be turned on, because one thing's cooked and you're like, right, crap, I'm off on time, and so on. And I think sometimes, like, the way I kind of see things and using kind of visual things, certainly when you feel like you're about to level up, just like a kind of a computer game, it's when it's the hardest, it's when you're kind of fighting the main boss of that level, so understand that when things feel like the pressure is the most, that's when you're the closest to the goal. That's when everything feels like, I can't do this anymore, and that's when you got to understand, right, okay, how close are you to that goal, can you afford a rest day? If you can, sometimes it's far better for your body, for your brain, to have that kind of mental health rest day, and go spend it with the people you love, go spend it with your friends, your family, and people you haven't seen in a while. Go do something else that isn't active, go chill out, have a day on a sofa and watch your favourite TV show or whatever, and then go back to work tomorrow. Go back to it tomorrow and take time. And I think we focus so much, especially on the bigger goals, I don't know whether you relate to this or not, but the bigger the goal, certainly in your mind, and that doesn't matter whether it's climbing Mount Everest, or like for me this year, my first Deca, triathlon, or it's your very first 1 mile run, they are all the same in my opinion, you know, because to all of us, they are just as big and they are gigantic mountains. If you're just starting and you're just getting into kind of exercise and running, it's a daunting place and it is a mountain. And there's a ton of things like, you know, maybe you weren't active as a kid and you hated PE. Joining a gym is petrifying, you know, and I think we need to kind of normalize these sorts of conversations. But equally, I think it's important to go, right, okay, taking one day off doesn't destroy the habit, taking two does, you know. So if you're taking kind of that day off, that's okay, reset, and then go back to work tomorrow, you know. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, right, 100% perfect, you know. I learned this from, do you know the guy Jay Shetty?
Yeah.
So I imagine a lot of people listening does, but those who don't, he's an ex-monk. He's got a really successful podcast. I followed him pretty much right from the start when he first kind of did his first podcast with another famous podcaster. And he is a perfectionist, or what he says he is, a perfectionist. And when he first started, he said aim for 70%, because what he would find himself doing is editing his content so much that it had to be perfect. It would take weeks and weeks to get out there, you know, and then all of a sudden he's got this backlog of stuff that he's working on, and he's not actually releasing any content, you know. Whereas he said aim for 70% perfection and allow the doing to get you better. And I'm a huge believer in that, you know, which is like, you see my videos, I'm not a professional video editor, you know. My YouTube channel is growing and also learning, you know. I try my best with what I know, but I am a doer, you know, so I will get better the more I do something. I am a slow learner, you know, because of my learning difficulties, but it's like they say, you know, God loves a trier, doesn't he, you know. And I certainly believe that. But what, like, I said to my son, because he's going to be 13 this year and he wants to create a little YouTube channel that is for gaming, and I honestly believe he'll be more successful than I am in a quicker time, because he is an IT whiz and gaming is his thing, and he's just great at it, you know. But I often say to myself, if there's a long way, I'll find it, you know, and if there's a hard way of doing something, I'll find that as well, you know. So it's those things that I kind of like to call it my 10-year plan, you know, that I'll get there in 10 years, but it'll take one day at a time. And just like with my degree and going back, I was the first person in the School of Sport in Cardiff Metropolitan Uni to graduate as a part-time student, because so many people before had quit for whatever reason, and whether that's just deciding it's not for them anymore, and that's fine, you know, but they kind of stopped and fallen short of graduating. And for me, with the help of my partner being behind me, you know, and certainly kind of being there at moments when I felt my most weakest and most vulnerable, to pick me up and brush off the cobwebs again and the kind of the wounds and so on and so forth. Sometimes self-inflicted, you know, sometimes not, but to push me towards the door and get me back out there, you know, that is consistency, and that is kind of progress, and that is winning. Like, focus on your 10-year journey as opposed to your 10-day journey, you know. And by all means, little habits, create those things, but I think it's also really important to be kind to yourself, you know. I think we have our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. That subconscious mind is our inner child, and I think I would never speak to my children the way I speak to myself, you know. And I think so many of us are like that, you know. So be fair to yourself. Don't put yourself down, because everyone else might not listen to what you say all the time, but your inner child does. And your inner child then turns around to you and says, when you go to set a big goal, whatever it is, whether it's buying your first house or doing your podcast or creating something for you, you know, and just sharing it with the world, you know, I think that's when your inner critic says, but you said this. All these years you've said this, and now you want to prove yourself wrong. Who are you kidding? And that's the hardest. Flipping that, and that's why that CV that I've been banging on about is so important. Because when you're first starting, when the foundations are the weakest, that's when you need someone around you who is that scaffolding. That is when you need that CV. And even if it's like a couple of clients recently, first ever open water swims, right? I've been taking them down kind of Barry Island in Whitmore Bay. Sometimes it's just getting in the water. Tick that box. Don't make it that you've got, I swim 1,000 meters in a pool, so I've got to swim 1,000 meters in the sea. No, you don't. Because what you will find is the sea is totally different than the pool. And you'll get in there, and not only is there a temperature difference, there's also waves, there's also fear, there's also vulnerability, there's also every shark movie that you've ever watched that will pop in your head. A bit of seaweed will touch your foot and you'll freak out thinking something's trying to eat you. And there's all these little things that come in the mix. And it's going, right, okay, change the goalpost. You're not banging out 1,000 meters right now. You're getting in the water. That is the goal. You tick. Give yourself a pat on the back. Now, what's the next goal? Let's dunk your head. You know, let's start small. Let's break it down to its smallest finite kind of option, if you will, and tick those boxes. Because I certainly, what my degree and what that length of time taught me is, if you have a goal, find out what it is. Just like I said about my 40th birthday, find out what it is and then work it out backwards to where you are. And the more you can do that with absolutely everything and anything, the more you'll realize that actually it's very, very possible and it's very attainable. And the more you add to that CV, the more it will then strengthen that belief. You know, because I'm about to do 10 Ironman in 10 days, and all those years ago I didn't know if 1 was possible. Last year I didn't know if 3 were possible.
Yeah.
But I knew who I was, and I knew that I wouldn't quit. So it didn't matter how it was going to look like. I knew it was going to get done. And it took loads and loads of failing forward, you know, because I say this to people, right? Because I recently got asked by a friend of mine, but aren't you afraid to fail? Now, failure to me is when you really want to do something. Take a race, for example. Imagine a busy street, half marathon, a marathon, or whatever sort of distance, right? But it's a busy event. You're dying to run that race, but you were too afraid to sign up, and you stood on the side cheering everybody else on. Nobody else knows that you wanted to do that race except yourself, and you're stood there or sat there thinking, I wish I signed up. I wish I was doing this. This looks amazing. This looks incredible. Look at these people, like, you know, from all shapes, all sizes, you know, doing this thing that you wanted to do, and you're stood on the other side of that barrier, gutted. That to me is failure.
Yeah.
Having a setback, right, is just a pause in your journey to get into where you want to be. And sometimes these setbacks might last a while, right? Because other things haven't aligned, you know, like life is complicated. You know, like I said, I've got 3 kids, I've got a partner, I've got other responsibilities in regards to like paying bills and so on and so forth. Those are barriers, you know, in order for me to navigate, you know.
Yeah.
And in a lot of respects, some of those barriers, they're also far more important than me PBing on a race. So I will sacrifice some training to take my kids to their activities, to watch my kids in their school plays, or stand there in the rain watching my son play football, because right now that's the most important thing. Right now I'm not going to get those moments back. What I will get back is when they're older and they're out with their boyfriends or girlfriends or their mates, and they no longer want to hang out with dad, because I'm not cool anymore, right? Then I've got all the time in the world to go chase that PB. And this is what people don't understand or realise sometimes, it's okay. It doesn't need to look perfect to be able to go out and achieve this goal. Because they go, well, I can't afford like training every day and doing this and that and the other. And it's weighing the pros and cons, Don't get me wrong, if you're having weeks off at a time, then you're going to lose some fitness, But if you did something this morning and you meant to do something tonight, but your kids have got something on, or they're ill, or like just to have it, like your partner's had a bad day, then don't say goodbye to her and go out the door and then go do your run. Go be the partner that your wife deserves. Be that person that supports them, because like I said, on race day, they're the person that stood in the rain supporting you. And it's that kind of two-way street that for me, like, I'm perfectly comfortable, like, not allowing the Strava kind of haters, if you will, because Strava's great, but it can also be very toxic. And you also get a ton of people that kind of misalign that kind of ability of, if I'm not fast, I'm not a good coach. And I think we need to normalise that. For example, Usain Bolt's coach, he's the fastest 100 metre sprinter, fastest 200 metre sprinter in the world. His coach can't run as fast as he can. Alex Ferguson, arguably one of the greatest football coaches and managers in this country's history, wasn't a good footballer. His management career was far greater than his football career ever was. And even at the start of his management career, he had one of the worst records starting because he was learning his trade. And I think so many of us, especially in the endurance sport world, we go, I'm going to be with this coach because this is how good he is as an athlete. And that's great that he's got there or she's got there. But does that mean that they can get you there? And sometimes, yeah, of course, they've got it, they've learned it, and they've invested just as much in their athletic ability as their coaching ability. But how many of them have got kids and a partner and all the rest of this stuff, to back it up? Some of them haven't got there yet with like the development of their family. I had kids from 21 onwards, so I didn't do the typical nightlife scene. I didn't do the lads' holidays. I didn't do anything. I did going back to education, sorting my life out and improving my kind of life, if you will, so that I could give a better life for my kids. And for me, that was more important, and it still is more important than my speed, my pace, my ability in regards to how everyone else perceives me. The people I work with believe I'm great at what I do. That means the world to me. And I know that if I'm going to be fast or I'm going to qualify for like world championship races or whatever, that's going to happen as an older individual, and that's okay. And like I said, the oldest man in the world to do an Ironman was 85, which means I've got time. And I like to think of it in that regards, because there's a ton of people, like I said, in my own kind of athlete roster that are way older than me and doing things for the first time. And I've said, since the pandemic really, to people, when was the first time you did something for the first time? When was the last time you did something for the first time, you know? And I think that's so important to keep doing new things, keep experimenting, keep trying new things, because you never know. You might like it, you know, and take it up, and if you don't, then in a lot of respects it's like food, isn't it? You try food, you don't keep eating it just because you're like, oh yeah, this is great, you're like, you know. And this is the beauty, like, you know, I wish kind of more kind of school sport was like this, you know, because then more people would get into sport, you know. I think it's the hardest thing, isn't it? It's like your PE teacher like trying to ram broccoli down your face, and you ate broccoli like as a kid, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna do this for fun because it's not fun. So you do that, and then obviously as your body is changing, especially as a female, like, you know, the last thing you want to do is when your body's changing and adjusting is wear different types of bras and go out there. And I'm kind of experiencing that with my daughter now, you know. And but it's important for her to find things that different sports, you know, and just try things. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. We won't do it again, you know, or maybe we'll try again in future. But it's the willingness to just go out there and try that I think is important, you know. And if it's not for you, that doesn't mean it's a failure. It's just not for you.
Yeah.
Go down a different path, you know. And it's the same with, like, I've had people that are close to me try Ironman races because they've been inspired by me, but then during the training found that it isn't for them, and they pulled out of their race, and other people have perceived them as a failure because of that. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think, if anything, that's what real bravery is, because they've put themselves out there, and that lifestyle that you have to adapt to in order to get your training done isn't for everybody, and that's okay, you know. And it's going, right, okay, that's not for you, that's fine. What else do you want to do? You know, there's a million things out there. Go do it. You know, try a million things. And it's kind of like the whole light bulb creation story, you know. You found a million ways on how not to create a light bulb, you know. But all it took was one, you know. And it's that moment that you, like, along your journey, like, certainly from when I first started to where I am now, it's all those setbacks that taught me so much more about myself, about who I am, who I want to be, about how not to do something, you know. My first ever thing, so like building up towards my first Ironman, Matthew Pritchard, right, was doing a world record for 30 half Ironman in 30 days, first person to do it. It was 4 weeks into my training, and management of the leisure centre I was working in at the time was like, we want a team of people to basically support his race, support his kind of a challenge. Would you be up for it? Because obviously you're doing what you're doing, you know. So I was like, yeah, sure, go on then. As it got closer to the thing, and like I said, at this point it was totally naive. Right, 4 weeks in,
seems to be a bit of a trender.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, but it's like Ross Edgley says it, innit? You know, be naive enough to start and stubborn enough to finish. You know, and a lot of that I kind of attribute to my ADHD, and then the stubbornness of myself, like, you know. But it's those things where I went into that. Now, no one else wanted to join me, so I was like, whatever, I'll do it myself, you know, whatever, you know, can't be that bad. I learned a lot about race nutrition that day. Through absolute failure, I turned up, I kind of went to Asda, I bought a load of Lucozade Sports, I bought a load of SIS nutrition gels, and I just rocked up. Absolutely naive, and was like, go on then, let's go. I came out last but one in the swim. Everyone was already changed on their bike waiting. I go on the bike ride. I'd never done a group ride before. you know, Simon Webb at the time was helping Matthew. He's does the Sleep When You're Dead triathlon events and All or Nothing events down Barry, and so on. So he was helping him with that. And he said, we've all done a group ride, yeah, so I don't need to explain. I was like, I haven't. He was like, right, okay, you're at the back. And I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of hung on with dear life to these people riding, and they were far better than I was, right? Some of these people, well-seasoned Ironman athletes, you know, this was a jolly for them. This was the biggest thing I'd ever done, like, you know. And there I was, like, sipping away these energy drinks and having these gels. Never had a gel before in my life, you know. And as you can imagine, stomach started growling and was like, right, you can stop there, you know. And I'm only halfway through the bike ride, you know. And I'm like, oh, okay. I better stop because I'm feeling a bit sick. So I stopped taking on any nutrition. Obviously, still got to finish the bike ride. Coming up the monstrous hill from Cowbridge up to the petrol station along the A48. At the time, that was the biggest hill I'd ever climbed. And there was like a van there, and he's like, do you want to jump in? I was like, no, piss off. I'm doing this. You know, a couple of people got in the van and met us at the top. I was literally the last person up that hill. As soon as I got there, as all the fit people do, off they went. And I'm like, what do you mean? We not rested. So it was like this thing where I was like, okay, right, keep going. We got to, because at the time he was sponsored by Peter Allen, so we got to this Peter Allen over by Rofe. Transitioned and put the running trainers on. And at the time, I was not a bad runner. I could run like 4:33 per kilometre for 10k. That was probably my comfort run at the time. But these boys could run, you know, and a few of the girls as well, like they were runners. And I learned that like they've been taking it easy on the bike. So I managed 10k with them, and then they were just gone, right? And I knew the route. It was kind of like round Rofe Park, round Rofe Rec, all the way down to Newport Road, back round a couple of times, and then off to the Peter Allen to finish, and so on. And I had my ass served to me like a trooper. I was cramping up. I kind of like was holding on to the metal railings of Rofe Rec Park. My whole right leg had cramped, and I'm there in agony, kind of screaming out loud, like, you know, because my leg is just, the entire leg is seized and cramped at the same time. And it was the worst pain I'd ever experienced at that time. But I didn't know anything about salts or electrolytes or anything like that, so I was just there in the mix of it. 4 weeks into my training, and they'd already gone, like they were like far into their run, and I kind of stretched out. This old lady came out of her house across the road. I was like, "You okay, love? You right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay. Right, you can, yeah, just go. It's fine, yeah, you know." And I'm slowly making my way to the floor, like, you know, to lift up my leg to stretch my hamstring out. I got over that. I kind of go around the park. I phoned my partner. I was like, I don't know if I could do this. Like, you know, this is insane. I'm like dying, right? So she does what every person needs at that point. Well, do you want me to pick you up? You know, like you've done amazing. Like, you know, just think this isn't your event. Like, you know, but this isn't what I needed to hear at that time. You know, I don't know what I needed to hear, but it weren't that, and I was just like, I gotta go, love. I'll speak to you in a bit, you know, and because I wanted to finish, because I was just like, if I don't finish this, everyone's gonna know, you know, and reality is no one cared anyway, you know, and like obviously my partner cared, and my kids were too young to know either way at the time, so they didn't really understand what I was doing anyway, but to me, I used that as the excuse, that I used it as the driving force that if I quit now, everyone is going to know, and not just everyone. On reflection now, it was more important that subconscious, that inner child, that I would know. And if I was going to quit on this, then what happens if I was going to quit on the main event later down the line?
Yeah.
you know, and I eventually got it done. Everyone at the time had already been 20 minutes, finished 20 minutes before this, and I ran up the hill. I was the last person to kind of come in. They were already getting in their car. Thought I'd already left, and they were like, "Oh, you finished? Like, we thought you went home," and I was like, "No, you bunch of bastards!" Like, you know, I was like, "No, I've been out there doing it," you know, and they clapped me all in all fairness, you know, and shook my hand and patted me on the back and everything, but it was brutal. I couldn't walk for the rest of the week and like proper learned the hard way. But you think, well, that was 10 years ago now, and those lessons are as vivid as they are now as they ever were, you know. And every year there's been a different race, a different lesson, whether that's been in training or in the main event themselves, like, you know. And I think that is what it's all about. It's about the journey, you know. And I think, going back to your first question, you know, what does adventure mean for me? It's self-acceptance through self-discovery, you know. It's using this because we don't know how long we're going to be here for, you know. And I think the more we can go down this rabbit hole, whatever it looks like for anyone, find out who you are by taking off the layers that other people have put on you. And some of those layers you might have put on yourself. Take yourself to a point where you can be confident enough to start, you know, because we're taught, especially in Britain, this old-fashioned kind of stiffer up lip, that it's like, oh yeah, don't cry, you know, be brave, you know, when the reality is you can't be brave without vulnerability. It doesn't exist, you know. You cannot have one without the other, and that's the truth when it comes to, like, if you want to be this person that is brave, that inspires others, that leads from the front, then you have to be vulnerable and you have to put yourself out there. And that means that sometimes you're going to have setbacks.
Yeah.
And that means that sometimes you're going to get it completely wrong, and that's okay. And by sharing your story, like I am now, hopefully you inspire other people to do the same. And with a bit of luck, with a bit of authenticity, you know, people will want to connect, people will want to follow the journey and be motivated along the way, because there was some little gem in amongst everything I've said that really resonated with that person.
Yeah.
And it's the same with all the YouTube motivational videos. There are some that literally just pop out and hit a nerve and inspire me. And sometimes it's not even about like me. It's about this person was like, there's a basketball player that is a motivational speaker now, and the way he talks about his dad made me want to be a better dad. So I listened to him talking about how he made it to the NBA, not because of the journey that I found inspirational for him. It's the way he talked about his dad. It's the way his dad used to pick him up as a child and made him believe in himself, that I wanted to be that dad, that I would pick up my kids in the way that would change their perspective, that would change their entire outlook on life, that would inspire them to do whatever they want to do, because their dad's over here failing and telling them that, like, listen, I failed, but it's alright, I'll be back, you know, and I'll go again, you know. And ultimately, like, as I kind of lean into this Deca challenge that I'm going to do now, if it doesn't get done this year, it will next year, or the next again, you know. And it's that thing that hopefully I've got a lifetime, you know, left in me that will be continually chasing, because it's like that incredible woman who swam from Cuba to Florida. Have you heard about her?
No.
So this incredible lady swam from Cuba to Florida. There's 2 films about her and a documentary. So if you jump on YouTube, if you jump on Disney Plus, there's a thing, and I think there's 1 or 2 on Netflix about her. Can't remember her name, but Jodie Foster played her best friend and her coach. She failed a million times trying to do this swim because of how difficult it is, how blinking far it is, because she did it in a bathing suit, you know. She ended up doing it in her 60s and completing it in her 60s. She started this in her 20s.
Wow.
You know, and everyone was like, she ain't gonna do it, it's impossible. And she got it done, and she spent her life trying to do it, and I think that is a life well lived, and I think that is the best thing ever, because some people can say, oh well, she wasted a lot of time and so on and so forth. I don't think that at all. I think she found a million ways on how not to do it and become an expert in how to do her thing. We often look at people with PhDs like of a certain status. The reality is they know a lot about a little. When further down the kind of educational ranking, if you will, and you can apply this to anything and everything, the further down we are, we think we know a lot about everything. The more you go up, the more you develop, the more you go down this rabbit hole of self-development, the more you realise you know a lot about a little, and a little about a lot, you know, but it allows you to truly know who you are. You're not blagging it, you're not trying to sell it to other people that you know everything about everything. I don't. I'm still learning, you know, and I think, like I said to one of my friends a couple of weeks back, they were struggling with imposter syndrome, and I said to them, the problem is, right now, you think you're the teacher, so your ego's put you in a place where you think you should know it all. Whereas if you put yourself as the student and use your ego and remain humble enough to always stay the student doesn't think they know everything. The student's there to learn. So although you can help your fellow students out and help those around you, you're not at any point expected to know everything.
Yeah.
Because you're just a student. And I think that's so important to life, and I think that's so important to these growth processes. Don't act like you know everything, you know, because life will humble you, because there's always going to be someone that knows more than you.
Yeah.
There's always going to be someone that's faster than you, better than you name it. So just stay the student, you know, keep learning, keep growing. Remember that it is your path that you're walking along, and you can at any point, at any time, and at any moment choose to change direction if you're not going the way you want to, you know, because there's going to be a ton of people that are going to try and force you this way, you know, like with this podcast. The more it grows, all of a sudden you're going to get someone who wants to sponsor. All of a sudden they're going to want you to move this way or this way. The more you stay true to yourself, the more you won't let that happen. And the more, that might take you a little bit longer to get there, but you'll be in the right place. And you'll be okay with that. And I think in today's society, where we can sit on our sofa and order food from an app, we can work from home, we don't necessarily have to leave our house. I think it's really important to remember that the greatest things take time, not the shortest things. You know, it's like swiping left or right on social media to get a boyfriend or girlfriend. You know, the best way is always going to be meeting them randomly whilst doing something.
Yeah.
You know, because you can instantly have that connection, you know, and I think this is where some of the major problems are coming out in society, where everything is so instant it's like, it's fine, I'll sack this one off, I'll get no one, you know. And you're just ordering another boyfriend or girlfriend, like, you know, by swiping left or right. And it's the same with food, and the same with all the rest of the stuff, isn't it? Whereas, like, I think there's so many more meaningful things that take so much longer. Like, when you get this podcast to where you want it to be the best thing you've ever done. And you already know it.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the beauty about the journey that we're all on. You know, that I never knew when I first started this, that I would be in a position where here I am, sat on a podcast, having a one-sided conversation. No, but like having a beautiful conversation, a beautiful moment that is amazing, because it's this stuff that's very reflective. You know, it reminds me of how far I've come. It reminds me of how far I still got to go. And it's these amazing things that you never know where this moment can take us, you know, and I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's really powerful, and I think in a lot of respects that's what fuels the next moment, you know, and then the next, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think the more we can break these moments down, the more we can then kind of be grateful for them.
Yeah.
You know, I think practicing gratitude is one of the highest kind of powers that we have. Same with authenticity. I think those two are the greatest sources of energy and fuel. And I think the more we connect to those, I think often mental health and mental illness is the fact that we're living life through the lenses of others. And the reason why we aren't so happy is because we need deep rest from the mask that we've been wearing. And the fact that, like, laying on the floor and having all your mates pile on top of you, it's hard to breathe under there, you know, and having all those thoughts and opinions placed on you, whether it's you doing it or other people, it makes it hard to breathe, you know. And I think once you start taking those layers off, it's a little bit easier, and you're a little bit more authentic with who you are, and you know who you are, and you also then in turn know who you're not. So then when someone tries to impose something on you, you instantly know it's not for you, or
Yeah.
whoever it is. And I think that's a great way to live, you know. So yeah.
You've given me like so much to think about, like, honestly. For me, like, this podcast has been exactly what I've needed right now. So thank you.
My pleasure.
For a start. I'm so excited for your Deca. You've barely even spoke about it, and that's blown my mind. Like, you're doing 10, is it full distance Ironman?
Full distance Ironman.
10 full distance Ironman in 10 days.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even come up with that?
For me, it was always like, when I kind of went down this journey, I kind of found out about it. I couldn't believe people were doing it. Just because I was like, well, one's hard enough, you know, and it kind of just blew me away. And for me, it's kind of like the tip of the pyramid, if you will, in regards to triathlon. And I know, and it's not to take anything away from anybody else, right? Because I know a lot of people, Ironman is the tip of their pyramid, and that's okay. For me, like I said, the way my brain is wired, having ADHD, I'm attracted to more extreme things. You know, I lack the dopamine of normal things, giving me a sense of pleasure or a sense of purpose or that high that everyone else is getting. So naturally, I'm drawn to more extreme things and stuff. So, which is why I will always swim in the sea as opposed to a lake or a reservoir, because it does nothing for me. You know, it's nice to be in the water, don't get me wrong, but dealing with the challenges that the sea will give you is what lights my soul on fire. So going into these things, and it's like years ago, I in the pandemic, right, first year, I saw this world record online. It was running the most half marathons in a month, and I was like, oh wow, I reckon I could beat that. And at the time it was 18, right? So I was like, the year before I tried running 20 miles a day for 14 days. It was meant to be, right? And it was because my brother tagged me in this thing online. There was like, if you were to run X amount of distance, it'd be you running to the moon and back. I was like, oh wow, that's really cool, you know. And then it was like part of this like medal company kind of thing that like you track your own distances and stuff, and then you can earn this medal. And he was like, oh, someone had done it in X amount of days and so on. And I was like, my brother then said, do you reckon you can do that? You could beat that? And I was like, I think it was like 23 days or something like that. And I was like, if I ran 20 miles a day for like 14 days, I'd beat it, you know. So I gave it a go. Now, like I said, I'm not a runner, you know. When I was a kid growing up, I was good at sprinting. So I was a 100 meter, 200 meter runner because of how tall I am. But I was not a distance runner. And I still think I'm not a distance athlete because I'm so tall. I just don't think I'm naturally built for that, you know. I'm heavy, I'm about 100 kilograms. However, mentally, I love it, you know, which means I'm never going to produce the best times. You know, if anything, I'm better at shorter distances than I am longer distances, but I love the mental challenge of it, which is why I do it, and I don't do short races. But he challenged me to that, and I went out, like before work, running 20 miles an hour in the middle of the morning, like, you know, like 4 o'clock starts. And as long as it got done throughout the day, so sometimes I do 10 miles before, a couple like miles in between, and then some miles at the end. But it was like each day 20 miles. Day 7, I'd kind of ran for 45 hours that week. I'd worked like just over, I think it was like 47 hours that week. And I was dead. I remember sitting on my living room floor eating tuna and pasta at like 12:30 at night, thinking I got to be up at 4 o'clock. And I was falling asleep eating this pasta. And day 7, my kind of knee ballooned and kind of swelled up. And I said right at the start, I'll do it, give it a go, and as long as there's no lasting impacts, you know. So when day 7 happened, I was like, right, it's done then. You know, I'm not gonna, because it wasn't a race or anything, it was just something to do. There was no point in pushing it. So I was like, I'm not gonna damage my knee just for the sake of my ego or my pride. So I called it, and I was raising money for the Minds mental health charity at the time, doing it all and trying to be like what I want to be, which is authentic with it. And I was by the Heath Hospital at the time, and I said, right, if you're going to be authentic, Chris, you need to take a photo right now. And at the time, I was just got off the phone to my partner. I've been crying, was gutted. First ever thing that I just kind of like quit, if you will, right? I know it was logical to stop it, but at the time it hurt, right, you know. And I said, right, take the photo. So I sat on a curb, and it's opposite the midwifery unit at the back of the hospital. And I sat on a raised curb of the bus stop, and I took this photo, and I'd been crying, my eyes were all puffy and watered. And I posted it on Instagram, and I said kind of my truth about it all. I said that I was stopping and everything. And following year, obviously I lost my job. I had all this time now. and I saw this record, and I was like, well, I've got this time now. Maybe I could beat it, because I'm not working 40, 50 hours a week or even more. So now I might be able to do this record and raise some money for the NHS and help with that, And the week before it, I kind of hadn't been out my house for 2 months, and went for a walk with my family around the bay. Got blisters from walking because I hadn't worn shoes in 2 months, and I had a ton of people at the time go, did you try something like this last year and fail? And I was like, yeah, did. I was like, cheers, mate. Yeah. I was like, nice one for that. You're right, I did fail. Thanks for reminding me. But it was something, and this was the first ever event that I remember my partner laying on a bed, and I was laying next to her, and she was like, do you feel nervous? And before this moment, every race I felt nervous, right? Every sort of thing that I kind of announced on social media that I was going to do this, I always felt nervous, like leaning into it, right? And I was like, no. And she's like, oh, okay. I didn't expect that answer. And she's like, why do you feel nervous? And she's like, because I know I can do it. And I just knew. I just absolutely definitively knew. And that month, I had all these people going, yeah, you ain't going to do it, And then as I got closer to 18, people then started wanting to come out and do a run with me. And I helped people do their first 5K. I helped people run their first 10K. I helped people to run their first marathon. That month I helped someone learn to ride a bike whilst I was running, and I ended up running 35 that month and almost doubling the record, and it felt great. It was that true moment where I kind of really flipped the switch in my brain and was like, I know I can do this, and then leaning into all the other Ironman events, and Cycling Britain, and like the other year in 2023 I did became the first person to do all of the Ironman events in the UK and Ireland in one season, and then decided to raise money for a mental health charity that looks after people in the armed forces and the emergency services community. So I decided to wear a weighted vest while I did it, and it wasn't to just make it harder or anything, but it was to represent that if they do their job with this on, and all the rest of the gear, which is far heavier than this weighted vest was, then I want them to know that someone like me is out here thinking of them and appreciating what they do for our country or our community. Because I think it's incredibly important that we have these people out there doing that, so we can chill out on our sofas, talk on a podcast, because it's the people. As much as we can criticise the NHS or the police, if we didn't have these services out there and the people that give their lives and dedicate their lives to serving their communities, then we'd all be in a lot of trouble when we're often having the worst days of our lives, So I found that charity, I went and did those things and became that first person, and Ironman were incredible and made this custom plaque for me and all the rest of it, which is awesome, and I was blown away because I never knew anything about it until they called me up on stage and so on. But it's kind of continually inspired more and more things, and then leaning into the Deca and finding more people online doing incredible things that they're doing, and I go, oh wow, love to give that a go, and then so I create a version myself that I can either afford or just do it myself, where this Deca, there's no medal, there's no support team, there's no kind of other athletes, no closed roads or whatever, it's just me, I'm sure people will join me, because I've put an open invitation out there too, but it doesn't really matter if they They run 5k with me, they run 10k, a half, a full. They do one day and I don't see them again, or they come out and do a little bit, or they just come out and have some jelly babies, like, you know. For me, it's that bringing that togetherness, that community, and wanting to ultimately just find more of myself, you know, and strip a little bit more off. And I think our confidence and knowing who we are, I think sometimes, although I did my first one and I gave myself that permission by kind of walking through that finish line and saying I can do anything I want and anything is possible, it's also very wafer thin, right? Similar to kind of layers to an onion, right? You peel one off, you can see through it. And in the grand scheme of things, you get those people that can do that and their confidence is through the roof, but that's their ego talking. You strip that ego away and then you're left with that person. Who is that person? And that for me is the adventure. That for me is my life purpose. That for me is what it's all about. So for me, all these challenges, all they've been doing is adding layers to that onion, adding layers to myself, of this self-discovery and kind of knowing who I am. So then if I am put in a situation in the real world where I need to prove it, whether, I don't know, say my house is on fire and I need to go save my kids, you know, am I that person that will put themselves in harm's way, knowing full well that I might not be okay, but that's what's required? Do I have that in me?
Yeah.
And I think doing these things, doing hard things, teaches me that. And it might be totally different to other people, because obviously running isn't running in a building, you know, and I'm aware of that. But it's also why a couple of years ago I went into being a police officer for a couple of years and did that, and it was the same reason. Whereas, like I used to say, everybody wants to be the hero until it's time to do some hero stuff, you know. And because you ask anybody that has done some hero stuff, they do not feel like the hero. You ask anyone that has been to war, people who they believe are the heroes are the ones that died out there, not the ones that came home. And don't get me wrong, there are incredibly inspiring people. Like, you know, I'm drawn to those sorts of people because of the characteristics in which they display. And for me, it's the same situation. Once you know who you are, it's very easy to stand by your actions and stand by your words, because anyone can talk, you know, and quite often too many people talk, you know. But what I want to know is, can I back it up? So for me, once learning about the Deca, I was like, one day that is going to be something I do. Initially that was going to be my 40th thing, but then after last year I just thought, why not now?
Yeah.
You know, because you put it off, and so many of us put these things off, and it's just like, well, why not? Okay, it might fail. I'm still 3 years ahead of where I envisioned it, and that's okay, you know. And so here I am giving it a go, attempt one, you know, and I know it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm not under any disillusion that it's going to be tough, but at the same time, I've kind of found little kind of tools that help me along the journey, and gratitude is one of them, you know, leaning into that, I tell people in situations, find the beauty in every situation, because it's just like if we were sat in this room and you turn the light off, initially you're in the dark and that's a bit of a worry and a panic, but give it enough time and find enough kind of stillness within you, and your eyes will adjust and you will find the light in there. So it doesn't matter whether it's raining, whether it is super cloudy, it's the worst weather in the world. Find the beauty in that situation, because it might all of a sudden be the way the rain is hitting the floor. Or like I remember cycling a joggle and being up in Scotland, and it was disgusting. The weather was like horrendous. It was a headwind, but honestly, there was a couple mountains in the distance, because we were up in the headlands, highlands at this point. There was a few mountains in the distance where the sun was just shining just on those 3 mountains, and it was something out of like Lord of the Rings. Like, it was so cinematic, and I was just like riding my bike like in the aerial position, getting hammered from a crosswind. As I came round this mountain, and I saw that image in the distance, and it was incredible. And I was just like, that's the beautiful image. And I said to the team that I was with, because we had a van meeting us every so often, I was like, the van's over there, because it was the thing that was nice in the distance to look at. And lo and behold, the van was actually towards that direction. I didn't know that at the time, so I kind of blagged it a bit, like, you know. But it got everyone else's attitude, because this was the first hardest thing that this team of athletes that I took had ever done before, right? So they were proper in the pain cave, and this was only like day 2 or 3, right? And they were hurting, you know. So getting them to rewire their brain, getting them to focus on that kind of that little beauty in the distance, that thing to keep them going, is something I've kind of really held on to in everything I do. You know, it's like, I was open water swimming the other day, and when I got in, it was super cloudy, and then as I was in the water, clouds started coming through, the sun started shining, and as your head's in the water, all of a sudden it's reflecting. You can see the sun rays through the water as you're kind of coming through, and it's finding those little moments, you know. So when I'm in these endurance events, when I am hurting, I lean into that, and I practice gratitude, and I lean into the beautiful moments, whether it's people coming out, whether it's me in that moment being and living my most authentic life, the life that I truly would live. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I would be doing more of it than less of it.
Yeah.
And to me, that is me living my authentic self, me being who I want to be, me showing the world, you know, that this is who I am and this is who I want to be, by filming it and uploading it onto YouTube or social media, and hopefully like inspiring people along the way, hopefully raising more money for, again, I'm kind of raising money for that kind of it's called Rock to Recovery UK, the mental health charity I mentioned earlier. So I'm raising more money for them. Happens to be their 10th year anniversary, so I've kind of come up with this brilliant idea or concept in my head. Whether I can pull it off or not is a different matter, but it's kind of like 10 Ironmen in representing 10 years of their charity, and wouldn't it be cool to raise £10,000 for that charity, you know, in a kind of well-rounded, beautiful, picturesque way. Whether it happens or not is up to everyone who wants to donate or not, like, you know. Yeah. But I'm certainly going to give it my best and give it a go. And like I said, to me, it doesn't matter if I get it done in a way that everyone else pictures it to happen. I know it's going to be the toughest thing, and I know that I'm going to give it my best, and the goal is to get it done every day. But I take away all the barriers. I take away like the time constrictions of, or you have to ride at this pace, you have to do this, you have to impress everyone else. I'm not here to impress everyone else. I'm just here to raise money and make a difference. And if I can do that by being just a dad, you know, a guy who's got kids, who's trying his best, that isn't a washboard, you know, built like a Greek god and all the rest of it, then maybe, just maybe, you can do it too. You know, because I started by running my first 5k, doing a treadmill running, doing my PT course, you know, to running my first half marathon after my partner ran hers. and she isn't a runner. She drives to the corner shop, she's that person. But she inspired me to run my first half, because she ran hers in a way to honour and remember her uncle who passed away from cancer. So if I can inspire other people by doing things that are extreme, and that aren't just, oh wow, yeah, doing doing that little thing, then brilliant. If people want to come out and run and do their first 10k with me, cool. It ain't gonna be fast, I can assure you. But it's these things that I think, what if, because for so long I used to say, oh well, what happens if I fail, and what happens if I can't do it? Well, what happens if you can? What happens if you do this? What happens if you succeed? What happens if this podcast blows up and you don't have to work anymore? You can just do this.
Yeah.
If more of us said what if, and we appreciate the journey instead of the end goal, because I promise you'll get to the end goal and you'll think, oh, okay, I'm here now. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Now what? The more we can live in those moments and appreciate those moments, then the more I believe life is in that. That is the key to it.
Yeah.
And that is ultimately the key to happiness. So long story, but for me, I'm doing a Deca because it is who I am. And then once I complete that, there'll be another thing. And I've been asked when is enough? But I think a lot of people equate it to an ego, when in reality it just makes me happy. Not try to prove anything to everyone else. Years ago I didn't feel the way I do about myself now. Whereas now it's literally just about me being who I am, and this stuff makes me happy.
Yeah.
And that's all it is,
That's amazing. It's very commendable. It's taking that leap and just, like you say, you're putting yourself out there. It's it is genuinely you. And if people can't tell that from this conversation, then what have they been listening to?
I certainly hope so. Yeah.
Where can people follow along the rest of your journey then? If they want to support you and see all the other amazing things that you're going to do after this Deca,
So my Instagram is IamChris_Hill, and my YouTube channel is kind of my company's name. It's Recovery Lab TV, and then my company is Recovery Lab UK. But yeah, and if you did wanted to donate, then I'd appreciate it greatly. But that's going to be on my Instagram bio link.
I'll include it in the description as well.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Just head to the description.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, awesome. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. What a great podcast episode.
Thanks for having me, honestly. Yeah. So if you ever get ever have someone reach out to you about doing a podcast or anything, I highly recommend it, because like with this, you never know where it's going to lead to.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for reaching out for me. It is intimidating when you reach out to people, as you know.
Yeah.
But honestly, just some of the best things happen just because you reach out, and then you never know where it's going to take you. So Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Like I said, this was an absolutely incredible episode for me. I loved just sitting here listening to Chris. He goes on all of these little tangents, and he's very visual with the way that he describes things, and that was really helpful for me. The metaphors that he was using really resonated with me, and I hope they really resonated with you too. This podcast is all about sharing information, getting as much free information out there to you guys as possible, and hopefully inspiring some people to make a change in their lives for the better, whether that's helping with their mental health, whether that's getting them into challenges, or just improving their fitness. Like, whatever we can do here at Adventure Athletes, that's what I'm trying to do. We got quite a lot going on at the moment, so we've got the usual like personal training, online coaching, which is really picking up at the moment. We've got some sports massage stuff, we've got outdoor activity days, and I'll be doing Tenny Fan as well this weekend for those that are listening when it comes out. Again, that's for fundraising for Sport in Mind. So yeah, there's a bunch of things going on. I'll be doing the Welsh Three Peaks with a group of people. So if you're interested in anything like that, or event support or anything, even if it's not on the website, reach out and I'll always see what I can do. It might be a case that it's not something that I can accommodate yet, but it might be something for me to look at in the future. If you have any requests at all, head over to the website, adventureathletes.co.uk. Drop me a message on the contact us page. It's got my email, it's got my phone number. Yeah, just drop me a message wherever you can, and yeah, I'll see what I can do for you. Until next time, guys.